Hello, everybody.
Hey,
All right. Welcome, y'all. This is another Forum One Future of Work talk. The goal of these talks is to give us a chance to dig into the work of one of our members with a particular lens towards the future of work, future of capitalism, the future of democratic systems, and other other big picture things like that. I'd like to introduce Neesha Mirchandani. Neesha is something of an impact entrepreneur whisperer, meaning that she mentors entrepreneurs who are focused on exponential impact, particularly in the climate solution space. Her specialty is helping impact entrepreneurs raise money and to rethink how they're approaching their problem space strategically. She's got a background in kind of old school business and consulting and management and marketing, communications, and all sorts of fun things, but has a strong passion for working on things that matter, that make the world a better place, which I think aligns with a lot of folks who are in Quorum One. So, Neesha, it's wonderful to have you in the Quorum. Welcome, and thanks so much for talking with us today.
it's lovely. I'm looking forward to it. Future work, isn't it exciting times we live in?
It is. It's crazy how much things are changing and how in the sheer pace. I know you think a lot about people who have exponential impact, but I think there's also just this question of living in an era or a time when things are just changing exponentially, like whether we choose to choose to like it or not, or choose to be exponential ourselves or not. So I was going to start off in one place, but that's kind of an interesting spot to to start, maybe, is just kind of like, how do you think of kind of the time that we're in now, and kind of where the challenges that we face as a species, as like individual humans trying to make it in the world, and just as people, living in this increasingly exponential era, like how does that land for you?
I think two ways. One is I force myself to slow down even more, take long walks to the lake and spend time on the beach, put my feet in the sand and um, slow down so much so that it forces me to step out of that stream of crazy. But then on the other side, I ask myself, how can I use AI for my founders to help them? And what does all this change mean if we were to apply network effects and systems effects to the work that we do? So it's on one hand, running away from it as fast as I can to give a break and to really think. And then the other is how can I use it and embrace it for my founders? So it's diametrically opposed ideas that I like to make coexist within me.
Brilliant. That make that seems like a good approach. um I know for myself, uh I'm always kind of working at the world and my understanding of the world from two different sides. Kind of this future side where it just seems like everything is possible, and then from this really tangible side, like what can you actually accomplish right now? Um, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they like get motivated by that that delta between the two, right? And so it's hard to both kind of slow down and take care of yourself, but also go fast, maddening at times, maybe. So you
Yeah.
do you do a lot of work in impact entrepreneurship, and I thought maybe we could, you know, by way of starting out, wonder if you could just um, kind of take a crack at answering the question of just like what is impact entrepreneurship exactly? Like, how do you understand the different parts of the impact entrepreneurship ecosystem and kind of how they all fit together for particularly for folks who may not be as familiar with it as you are?
Yeah, so I've coached a lot of founders in biotech and in, straight up SaaS and tech. And 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that my son may not have a planet to live on if I continue doing what I was doing. So I still love dealing with, technology and biotech and all those things. But I started coaching founders in the impact space, and my entree was really through climate and regenerative agriculture, circular economy. And so I would find entrepreneurs doing work in that space and try to take what I learned from lean startup and from many of the things we all know in the startup world to apply to the impact space. So that's kind of how I started. And it sucked me into a point where before I would feel climate anxiety, and now I just feel excited and jump out of bed in the morning. Which entrepreneur am I get to help today? And it's an amazing feeling.
So, what? I mean, you mentioned the term regen and regenerative, and I'm wondering, again, particularly for folks who are less familiar with that term, if you could take a swing at explaining what the heck regen is.
Okay, so whenever someone defines regenerative, a whole bunch of people out there are probably canceling me for giving the wrong definition because there is no agreed upon definition. But in the example of nature, if there's a fire, you'll see little green shoots come out, and it kind of like a phoenix rising from the ashes if you want to be dramatic. But if you just want to be simple, nature has a way of restoring and regenerating itself. So any business that works in the area of regenerative is looking at a problem humanity faces with that same lens of like, how do I make this a regenerative solution that almost mimics nature and builds on what nature. So I look for businesses that are using nature to do that network effect, unleashing network effects using nature, or modeling based on my biomimicry or circular economy. So how can I take one thing and turn it around, and then it becomes, an impetus for that circle to keep going on and on instead of dumping those chemicals into, our waterways. So it's a very different lens on um, business. You're not just like creating an app, but then there's no sort of like loop de loop to close that. And so one of my founders is using sargassum, which is washing on the shores in the Caribbean and in Florida, and turning that sargassum into something useful. So that's taking a waste product and using it for bioplastics or fertilizers or different applications. So that's kind of how I see it. But again, not the I'm not the one who can define regen. It's in everyone's mind what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I in my own studying the regen space, it seems like closed loop, kind of this idea of like closed loop capitalism and
Yeah.
closed loop product cycles is really, really important, right? The previous frame, older frames of environmentalism were very much seemed couched in like, sustainability. How can we make a process be more quote unquote sustainable? How can we go and reduce carbon in the atmosphere or clean up the water? In kind of project terms, like
Mhm.
linear terms. And this approach is more about thinking in terms of cycles that close and loop in on themselves. How can we think of everything we do as part of a natural cycle? Right? Does that sound like a fair?
There's another piece of this, which is, in traditional conservation, you would put land into a conservation easement and then you would just let nature take over. But when humans work in concert with nature, sometimes we can unleash much bigger network effects. And that is what I look for is like, how can we humans be good for the earth? Not just nature is there and we're here. We work together. And so to me, regenerative has a very active component to it. It's not just, oh, we leave nature be and we rewild it. No, I really want a world where we are more like in concert with nature, doing things together. That's the beauty of the human race. And honestly, that's how we're different from AI. It's like we have this agency of working with nature, human emotion, and connection. We are nature, as one of our core members just said, Jason. When we separate ourselves, that's when the disconnect happens.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's that movement uh, of thinking of ourselves as preservationists of some
Mhm.
natural order over to thinking of ourselves as stewards, right? Like we are here, humans exist. We were produced, from this natural world. We are of this natural world. We have that natural world inside of us. And we have all these gifts of choice for a reason, right? And so what can we do with them to help steward nature in an active capacity? So that's beautiful. So I wanted to share that, Brandon had shared in the chat that one of his favorite parts of working with Rivian is that they're using ocean dumped plastics and then turning those into crates and fixtures that they use all throughout their manufacturing plants. So those types of taking things from the end of some sort of cycle and then feeding them back in.
Yeah.
Of course, then that feeds in other steps of rethinking, everything, right? So what happens, what happens with those batteries in those trucks and SUVs when they reach end of life, and where do they go from there? And maybe they go from there to local power. Local power storage where you don't need as much recharge capacity, but then what happens after that, right? And just thinking it all the way through until somehow the loop completely closes. So Neesha, question. So I know you work with all kinds of entrepreneurs, right? Not just impact focused entrepreneurs. In fact, there's, as you were saying earlier when we were speaking, there's a lot of oftentimes synchronicity between folks who are working in kind of more traditional entrepreneurship with impact entrepreneurship. Obviously, Quorum, that's a big approach of ours as well, is finding ways that kind of traditional entrepreneurship can help subsidize some of the more impactful focused things. And so, but just can you talk a little bit about the kind of work that you do when you're working with entrepreneurs and with impact entrepreneurs? How exactly do you help?
So let's say you're just building the next billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar dating app. You've invented the next Bumble, I don't know, Tinder, one of those. Well, I help you build that, and as part of that, to pay it forward and to build Regenerative into your business model, I have something that I'm working on, which is, I like to call it putting climate on your cap table or putting nature on your cap table or the planet. Haven't really quite figured out what that is. You and I can noodle on that a little bit, but essentially you don't have to be an impact entrepreneur to make an impact. And so even if you're creating the next Salesforce app sitting on top of the Salesforce ecosystem, you can put, the planet on your cap table. And so I help these founders, they pay it forward in this way, and every business becomes an impact business. So that's one. If you're actually doing something in regenerative or in a Rivian or something in that space, even then I think creating more linkages so that we leverage all the traditional funding mechanisms, but we co-invent new ones. So no one trying to make an impact should ever have to struggle to make money or to raise money. So the customers you need and the capital you need magically show up as long as you check our boxes. Which are the normal table stakes like? Do you know your market? Do you know your competitors? Do you know what kind of product you're building? So the basics.
So that process that you're talking about of making it easier for funding to just kind of find you or to connect, is that the magnetic pitch method that you've talked about? I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and how that works.
So magnetic pitch method is my way of essentially helping funders and founders. I call it magnetic pitch because when you pitch, usually you'll pitch 100 investors and maybe you'll get a handful to be your funders, but it's exhausting. You're on Zoom calls, it's back and forth. So I asked myself, how can I make this a little easier? And the conclusion I came to is you actually want to attract your right fit funders and you want to repel the wrong ones. So like a magnet, you don't want to waste time on the tire kickers or the people who are never going to fund you. They're very intrigued by you. They like you, but they're just not right for you. And so you waste less time on those people by repelling them. And a lot of founders get a little upset with me because they think like, no, 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 I don't want to scare anyone away. But the truth is that time is more valuable than money. And so the less time you spend on people who aren't really going to invest, the better for you. And so my pitch methodology is really designed around that and checking the boxes for the right one. So we spend a lot of time actually personalizing the pitch and sending out that beacon to get those people to reach out to you. Imagine a founder telling you, hey, I want to pitch you now on why you should be part of our portfolio. So that's it. Magnetic pitch method.
Love it. Okay, that's great. So then,
Yeah.
yeah. So then, in terms of, I mean, like taking it down kind of one level deeper, right? So I should, by the way, just to do an aside here. Look, I mean, you do a lot of work with entrepreneurship and working with impact entrepreneurs. Obviously, like in your view, how, like as we talk about like the future of work, right? I think for me, part of what how kind of entrepreneurship fits into the future of work and fits into kind of the poly crisis, like all these problems that humanity is facing into, is that we need a lot of solutions in a very short period of time, right? The way I see it, we need to start more startups like in the next decade than maybe we've started in the last 30 or 40 years, and we need to scale or like go through their learning and iteration process very, very quickly in order to solve some of the problems that we have. So in some ways, some of these crises are actually crises of entrepreneurship as well, in addition to crises of environment or social justice or inequality or any of these other things. And so I guess like in your view, like how does entrepreneurship need to change to sort of bring us into this new era and impact entrepreneurship in particular? Like what would you say needs fixing?
Mhm. So, the way we have it now is there's the legend of Silicon Valley and the hallowed halls of, Sand Hill Road and all that stuff. But that model is designed for most startups to fail and only the billion-dollar, unicorn and decathorns to do well. And I believe that if we want to make an impact, we need to optimize for more than money. Money may be one outcome. Definitely, I have nothing against money. I'm, all for everybody having money. But if we want to optimize for the real things that our kids and our grandkids, and in fact, we will need just to have a livable planet, I'd love to see a startup that's measured on how many gigatons of carbon did you remove? Did you reverse biodiversity? And that may not just be an impact founder. It might be a tech founder that put climate on their cap table through our mechanism or any mechanism, frankly. I don't care if you choose some other mechanism, but they measure their outcome not just based on how many jackets they sold, but how much impact they had, or not how many dates they put together or how many couples came together on their dating app, but also how many gigatons they took out of the atmosphere of CO2 and cycled it back into nature. So I would love our metrics to be more balanced. And I think entrepreneurship will just go through the roof because we want to be more inspired. Everybody who has a job at Google or Facebook wants to get up in the morning and know they're doing more than creating a search engine or whatever. They want to know that they've actually made the world better for their kids, for themselves, and for future generations. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur to make a difference, I think.
I agree with you. I also think that oftentimes the ways that we define entrepreneurship can be very, very small, right? And it can exclude groups of people who are doing extremely entrepreneurial, extremely creative things, but they don't follow. Small business owners starting a local business. It's like, oh, those are entrepreneurs. They don't count, right? Which can be really minimizing of people's approaches and life experience. And so I think that it could be that both are true, right? Like not everybody needs to be out there being an entrepreneur, and also like entrepreneurship is kind of a much bigger space than a lot of people give it credit for, right?
Yeah. I mean, someone within Quorum One might contribute to some startup like I do. I mean, basically a service provider, and I contribute to these startups. And in my opinion, they're as much of a climate philanthropist or a regenerative change maker than someone who started that company, because they wouldn't be able to make it without them. So I think that we all have a piece to play and a part to play in this.
Absolutely. So I think, like as you look at, I mean, you bring up some really interesting points about like how do we measure impact, right? And how can we more well align the efforts of our organizations with driving this impact. But on a practical level, how do you actually do that? So I know you spend a lot of time thinking through solutions. So
Mhm.
I hear people talk about like public public good stock markets, or retroactive public benefit grants, and all sorts of structures for trying to move. And I'm just like, what's your view on this? Like when you look at like potential solutions, kind of more structural solutions, like large scale um, exponential solutions. Uh, like, yeah, what pops up in your mind? What are you excited about?
So I wasn't going to talk about this publicly, but I'll give you a little hint. After working with so many different founders, being a judge for competitions and seeing a lot of different solutions, after about almost 5 years in the space, I realized that, yeah, we need to unlock a lot more funding, but also public support for these people. And so I've been working on creating essentially a dashboard that would help us not only quantify it, but tell these stories of impact. So more people can be energized. I don't care who they are and what they can contribute, but I believe all of us have an impact that we want to make. And whatever that is, it plugs right in. It might be money, it might be writing this into your will, or it might be just, a 15-year-old like my son doing something. So I really believe that that's the next step. But
Yeah.
I'm not a techie, so building the platform from a technical point of view, I've got Canva skills. So I can do the UI ugly version, and then I'm much smarter people than me can actually build the tech.
Well, it takes a lot of different types of intelligence to get any of these things off of the ground,
Yeah.
and that's part of what Core One is for, right? To bring those pieces together. So I think that's great. Like providing more visibility into the impact, and particularly for the investors, more transparency into how their investments are actually driving what the change that they want to see. So I think we've got a couple of questions that have come in. Uh, from the audience folks. One from Mark, who we'll get to which we'll get to in a second, but I want to kind of get to that by way of the one that is Steven's bringing forward, which is really around, he says that he loves the call out that the current systems are optimized for 10x unicorns. Like how might we apply capital in a way that is more efficient in maximizing impacts or overall outcomes? So instead of creating the next unicorn, how do we create the next 100 businesses that we need to have large scale uh, or otherwise global or exponential impacts? Like, how do we do that?
Yeah. I think it's through the product that I'm working on right now, which is the dashboard, is it won't happen overnight. We're in the media, we're in a soundbite world where it's like, decathorn, unicorn.
Yeah.
Is like a one soundbite, and we need to come up with our soundbite that will then change the conversation. So it's not just the money, it's, we took so much CO2 and, transformed it, or we took this much sargassum and made it into bioplastic or whatever. So I think that telling that story in a way where people feel almost like a unicorn doesn't work anymore and it's not cool. Like if you're just talking about money, then you're missing the point. And that social currency has to be built over time. So I don't see this as even something I'd be able to change in my lifetime. And it's like planting a acorn and never seeing the oak tree fully 200-year-old oak tree. I just know that it's my job to put that acorn in the ground or several of them and see which one germinates. But I don't think we need 100 experiments. I think what we need is double down on the ones that are going to be our version of a unicorn in the impact space. And then the nuanced way we want to deliver the soundbite. I spent the first part of my career in advertising, and I worked, for big agency. We had like IBM, Microsoft, these were our clients. We did Super Bowl ads. How can I bring some of that experience from that part of my career to this so that we can tell the story in a way, goes viral? Or we get the big brands to be part of it. There's a fear of greenwashing and, getting too soundbitey, but there's something to be said for capturing the zeitgeist and owning it.
I think that's a really powerful perspective. I think about it often when listening to or watching the wild swings of kind of our stock market ecosystem, right? And and just like Wall Street goes up, Wall Street goes down. The FTSE 100 is like falls off a cliff or whatever. And then all of a sudden, all of these stories get told, and people like picking apart like why is it that that this company is moving in that direction, or that these prices are, why are we seeing so much volatility within this sector? And I think it's really important to remember that this is all just about a shared narrative that we're writing for ourselves, right? And so that aspect of giving folks something to focus on, and also supporting the community of people who are developing that narrative. The journalists, the entrepreneurs, the thought leaders that are kind of like watching what's happening in the world and then helping us all kind of understand it. So I think, obviously the whole ecosystem of news that has formed around the financial markets is really powerful and it really commands a lot of attention. So what does it look like to get an even greater level of attention to things that impact the health of the entire planet, of the species, the long-term viability of humans as a construct?
I think that's what Quorum One can do as well, because it's a group of people that come together, and there's a power in numbers. As also the connective tissue between people is really modeling how we can do that with our group, and then that becomes bigger and bigger, and the next thing you know, everyone's following our lead. So that's kind of what I like about these networks, even though they're very loose and we all doing our own thing. But when we support each other, then it's exponential. It literally is. Me to the power of 200 is, or 2000 or 20,000. Suddenly, it's like a traffic jam you can create with one idea. As long as you're clear and you test the idea and you put an idea that's compelling, then you can create that impact.
That's very inspiring, Neesha. That's very inspiring. I mean that truly. So I think this is like a good time for the question that Mark brought forward, because we're talking a lot about new organizations, entrepreneurs like creating new things. But of course, most people in the world are working with or part of organizations that are already around, right? That have been around for a while, often. And so the question that Mark brings forward is, many employees, especially younger generations, are seeking more purpose, more meaning in their work. And so how can companies align employee engagement with a strong organizational purpose? So like particularly, I think on the startup front, it's like one whole area that we've been exploring a bit already. But what about for like existing organizations that want to do better and want to support these yearnings of their workers, their employees, their team members to be part of making the world better? But they're also they exist for a while. They've existed for a while. So how do you kind of make sense of that? Like, is it even possible for existing organizations to kind of restructure and realign around regional awareness?
I think it's It's interesting because I did work for IBM, which had like 340,000 employees when I was there, and I worked for a 19,000 employee advertising global ad agency in like, I don't know, 143 offices in 65 countries. I don't even know how many countries IBM is in, but sometimes you feel like you're a tiny little drop in the ocean and you don't matter. What I did was every job I had in every company I worked for, I created a project that was my own. And then I worked it up the food chain till I finally got a sponsor to listen. And IBM, it was the chief marketing officer of IBM. She controlled the $1 billion marketing budget. And, whether it succeeded or failed, it allowed me to always feel like in charge of my own career. And people knew who I was, mainly because I did something so different and so crazy that they were like, at least whether they liked the idea or they hated it, sometimes they hated it. You have some emotion towards it. And so if you started something like that within your company, align it to a corporate goal, make sure that it's something that'll actually be palatable to your boss. You don't want to lose your job over it. But you can always like start these little ventures. So I think that's a good place to start.
It's great. I think the one of the points you bring up that resonates really strongly for me is that apathy is really like the biggest enemy in a lot of these organizations, right? That belief that nothing can change. Um, any little bit of momentum, any little bit of thing that's sort of disrupting the status quo helps move things and
Yeah.
just things, right? And helps create the possibility for the acceleration of that momentum.
And we think like that little piece doesn't matter, but it is the only thing that matters is we do that little bit. When I started helping startups in this space, I kept wondering like, is this going to add up to anything? But then after a while, you realize that even if it doesn't, and assume the worst that it doesn't, the act of doing something is so empowering for yourself that it's just, to me, it's better than therapy. Like, don't go to therapy if you cannot afford it, but do this. Help one person who's doing something good, pass a policy, you know, do some sustainability initiative in your organization. Do it for yourself, not for anyone else. Do it for your own sanity. It's amazing. I've not felt climate anxiety. Once in a while, I'll hear some really bad news, floods that kill people in some country, or that's like a normal human reaction. I feel so empowered that I can be part of the change that I want to see in the world, that I literally don't have time for, hand wringing. There is no time. I'm like helping a founder instead. So if I feel the hand wringing coming on, it means I'm not doing enough. It's like, Nisha, get on. You need to find someone else to help. You're not doing enough. So I'll take a pro bono case, just because I feel like, okay, anxiety is setting in. That means I need to activate.
Again, really inspirational. In Quorum, we have a lot of folks who I think would potentially identify themselves as impact entrepreneurs, or maybe they wouldn't, but I would probably call them impact entrepreneurs, people trying to ultimately make the world a better place through entrepreneurial innovation. We have folks in Quorum that are approaching this more from the research side. We have folks that are approaching kind of from that nonprofit space, and then folks definitely approaching it from kind of the for-profit. Can you take profit incentives and then align them with the thing and create that's like the ultimate kind of dream, right? These flywheels. I guess just like, what are your tips for these types of folks, for impact focused entrepreneurs? Like, where do you see people make mistakes? What is some wisdom that you would offer up?
We tend to have a do-gooder, save the world vibe, and then we forget to do the normal table stakes things that investors, that funders, in fact, that even as entrepreneurs, we should do. And then we look up 4 years later and we haven't moved forward because we didn't do customer co-creation validation. We didn't look at the size of the market. We didn't do some of the things that a normal startup could do. And so part of what I do in Magnetic Pitch, it's probably the least popular thing that I do, but the most important one is really bring that due diligence to the table. so that your startup works, even if you take the impact side out of it. It doesn't, no one, you don't have to go to someone and say, see, I'm saving the world. You should fund me. You should be like, no, this is a good business idea. That's why you need to fund me. And then, oh, by the way, the impact is the cherry on top. So you don't lead with impact, which is counterintuitive. And that's why I love tech founders, people who've done it before, because they have that discipline and they come at it with solving a real problem. And then they're like, oh, by the way, it's also circular economy. It's also blah, blah, blah. So it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it works like magic if you can be a little disciplined and do that step.
Beautiful. It looks like we do have somebody, maybe William, who's down to share an idea. So, William, do you want to hit the call-in button and maybe bring your idea forward? And
okay, so I have this friend of mine, and she teaches yoga, and she says a lot of very mindful things. And last year or a year and a half ago, when I saw her, she was like, we need an app that like looks at your calendar and finds those little like 10-minute and 15-minute like bits, maybe even half an hour, and says, can I get you to go outside, for this 15 minutes? Can I get you to do some breathing exercises? Step away from your computer, like just commit to that, like sticks it in your calendar for you, and then you get the advanced version where it finds there's a half an hour meeting that you got in the middle of the afternoon and says, can you move this to somewhere else? You do like a whole thing, like go in 2 hours with your family or whatever, do that thing. So yeah, it's been bubbling up a bit recently, and I could get ChatGPT to write most of it probably. But the problem I need is some motivation and some people that I will do some of the marketing and other stuff that I really hate doing and I'm not very good at. And whatever it is, branding, all that go to market stuff that I'm down with like the user testing and that kind of stuff, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm just haven't really done much before.
So my question to you would be, before you spend all this time,
Yeah.
I would try and pre-sell the app to 10 people.
Yeah.
And figure out what it is that they feel they need, because it's a hypothesis at this point.
Yeah.
And it could become a time suck if you don't do the research. So maybe they'll say, no, I would never pay for that, but I'd pay for this instead. Or I have this app that kind of does this, but it doesn't do this part. And so it might take you in a different direction than what she originally came up with. But my other question would be, this is one of my other things that I do with founders is, what's your moat? If it's so easy that ChatGPT could write this for you, then what's to say that someone could just copy your idea and just do the same thing? So you want to create a strategic moat around your invention so that it's not that easy for someone to, steal it. So if you solve these two problems, find a burning need, and then figure out how to create an IP or network effect or community or whatever moat around it, multiple moats is what I like. Then you have a winner chicken dinner, because you know exactly who's going to buy it. And then the last step is to co-create it with your customer every step of the way and have them test it. And I would not actually do an app like this. This is probably where it's a little hot, spicy take, but I love spicy food because I'm Indian. But I would say wait and get it validated and people should be so desperate for it that after they're co-creating it with you, they're like, okay, when's it coming? When's it coming? And that's when you build it. And you almost have them beg you to build it before you do. And I promise you, if you do take this advice, you'll thank me later. But if you're like most entrepreneurs, you'll probably try the hard, struggle a bus way because you're in love with the idea, or she's in love with the idea and she's like, let's do it. And then You'll come back to me 4 years later and say, I wish I'd done it that way. But mine is the less sexy way because, you have to wait, you have to ask people, it's your comfort zone. What do you think, Hank?
I think that's incredibly sage wisdom. I think it definitely takes a lot from the the lean startup customer development approach.
Yeah.
I love getting that early feedback first, particularly for something that's more consumer focused, because it's pretty easy to find the people. It's a lot harder when you have an idea where like just finding the people is so much work. It's even more important then. But when it's pretty easy to find the people that should have the problem, it's pretty easy to validate. And then what I do emotionally is skip ahead and say, okay, well, maybe it's kind of scary or it just it feels fun to try to build something. But it feels more scary to go have a bunch of conversations, right? Where people could reject the idea. But if you skip ahead emotionally to like, okay, if I have 10 people that are really excited about this, right? And then they can each like refer somebody else and like throw in some money and right, like just thinking about, it'll be so much easier for me to get this off the ground once I have 10 people who are really excited and I can kind of vibe off of it with them. I think that's maybe the carrot that I could use emotionally to get myself to go do the annoying thing, which is have a bunch of conversations where people could reject me.
And be ready for people to not just reject you, but invite them to reject you. Because if you're like, hey, I love this idea, what do you think? They're going to be like, yeah, it's awesome, but they'll never buy it. Say, tell me why I shouldn't do this. And they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Or like, what should I do instead? Like, what's driving you insane? So it's like using this as a way to invite conversation and then being critical and not feeling bad about it. That is the best thing you can do. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Probably
you.
not what you expected, but
Well, I don't like to have too many expectations.
That's
you're already winning at this.
exactly. That's like right the perfect place to start. I love that. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that question forward, William. We could have time for one more if anybody else wants to hop in, or we could kind of move towards wrapping it up. I don't know. Anybody else feel called to jump into the hot seat? I'm impressed that we got one. William, you are a brave person.
Rock star. Yeah.
Total rock star. Cool. Well, I'd say that's probably a good place for us to leave it. This was a really good session. Thank you very much, Neesha. Thanks everyone who joined along in the chat, bringing your questions forward. Thank you, William, for bringing your idea. And we'll see you all on the next one. Video.